My parents looked down on my wife, not knowing she came from a wealthy family. Her family are real estate tycoons, possessing generational wealth. Her parents sent her to the US when she was only in middle school. My family is rich, but we aren't wealthy like her family, whose wealth is sustainable and lasting across generations. Her family's companies have been passed down since her great-grandparents. Throughout my life, my parents have always disapproved of the women I dated because of their backgrounds. Everything always went well until they asked about their occupation and family background. I understand they want to ensure the woman I marry can take care of me, but it's getting absurd. I met my wife at university and we hit it off right away. I wanted to become a lawyer while she was in school just to get a degree. By the time I graduated and became a lawyer, she had opened her own small coffee shop near our area. My parents found out I was dating someone and invited us to dinner at a high-end restaurant. I told my wife we didn't have to go, mentioning that my parents are judgmental. She smiled and said she didn't mind, and that she would do whatever she could to win them over. When my wife met my parents for the first time, everything went fine. But an hour into the conversation, my dad asked what she did for a living. She said she owned a small coffee shop. My dad scoffed and said, "So you expect to date my son with a low income?" I cut him off and told him to stop. My wife responded that she was making a decent income from her store due to the college students who frequented it. My mom joined in, saying, "We always imagined our son marrying into a wealthy family. I'll be honest, this relationship isn't going to work out." My wife smiled and calmly asked, "So, what do you do for a living?" My dad proudly replied that he became a lawyer in his late 20s and joined one of the largest firms on the West Coast. My wife asked for the law firm's name, and my dad responded. Her face lit up as she said, "Oh, that's my uncle's law firm." My dad looked confused and asked what she meant. My wife explained that her uncle was one of the founders of that firm and used the inheritance from her grandfather to start it up. Still confused, my dad said, "That can't be right. There's no way a small coffee shop owner like you is related to the CEO of the firm I work for." My wife smiled again and said, "Would you like me to talk to him? Maybe give him a word about how you judged me and looked down on me?" Now you can watch the second part by pressing share and more. Part 2. My parents looked down on my wife, not knowing she came from a wealthy family. My wife smiled again and said, "Would you like me to talk to him? Maybe give him a word about how you judged me and looked down on me." Both my parents laughed in her face, thinking my wife was bluffing. I stepped in and called them out on their rude behavior. I told them that not everything is about money, and for once, to let me date and marry someone I wanted. My dad argued back, saying that in order to sustain our family's future, it was my duty as their son to do what they said and marry the person they chose. They looked at my wife and told me that I shouldn't date someone like her. My dad started getting up and said that this dinner was a waste of time. He ranted about how he felt insulted and angry that my wife even claimed she was related to his boss, even though she came from a poor family. Both my parents left the restaurant, and I went home with my wife, crying. My wife comforted me throughout the night, and the next day, she started trying to call her uncle. I told my wife to let it go, that she had nothing to prove to them. I told my wife that I just wanted to cut ties with them and continue living our lives together. For the next 2 or 3 years, we lived our lives peacefully together. She still owns her coffee shop, and I've been working at the same law firm for about a year since I left my last one. That's when my parents arrived at our house unexpectedly in the middle of the night and asked to make amends with us. I wanted to shut the door as soon as I saw them, but my wife came in and welcomed them inside our home. I had a talk with my wife and asked her why she let my parents in after all they did to her. My wife told me that even though my parents judged her, they were still my parents, and she knew deep down that I wanted them to get along. We sat my parents down, and my wife asked how they were and how life had been for the past few years. My dad started boasting about how he got a promotion at the law firm, and that he's making a lot more than he did the past few years. My dad asked how my wife's little coffee shop was going, and she said that it was stable. My mother joined the conversation and said that she was a good person and that they had found someone suitable for me. I almost flipped out when I heard her say that, but my wife held my hand. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm already married to my wife." My father then stepped in and said that they could get all the divorce papers ready, and that the person they found was someone under his management who would take his position one day. I could tell that my wife couldn't handle it anymore, and I just let her talk. My wife cut off my parents and told them that she had been nothing but respectful to them and that she was tired of their behavior. My wife continued ranting about how all they talked about was money, when she had more money than both of them combined. That's when my dad started laughing and said, "You have more money than both of us?" My wife, with a blank stare, looked at them and said, "Do you want me to prove it?" Now you can watch the third part by pressing share and more.